Hello, thanks for joining me. This is going to be a talk about our journey with alerts. Last year, our operations team asked to replace some dashboards with alerts. So we stood up a system to meet that need. What surprised us was the continuing demand for more alerts. And right now we have 30 alerts running in production. So in the next 20 minutes, I'll explain what made that so successful and the use cases that alerts have been applied to. You might want to consider using alerts in your organization. Let me introduce myself. My name is Bob Newstadt. I've worked at a lot of different companies, and currently I'm at HopSkipDrive. What HopSkipDrive does is arranges safe and reliable transportation for kids. They're headquartered in Los Angeles. That's where I'm coming from today. And HopSkipDrive operates in all the time zones in the US at many major metropolitan areas. Mostly, the business is driving kids to and from school as an alternative to the yellow school bus. And as I go on, I'll explain more about the HopSkipDrive business, but what I really want to focus on is alerts. So, but let me tell you about where alerts fit into business intelligence and how we run business intelligence at HopSkipDrive. We have 4 different areas that we operate in. From left to right, we set up data platforms. This includes setting up data warehouses, the integration tools to move data from one place to another, and tools like Tableau visualization tools. So those are the platforms we do our work on and we provide data to the company with. On top of that, those platforms, we build data products. Many of them are dashboards. We have over 1,000 dashboards in Tableau and over 400 are used each month. Besides that, we do regulatory reporting and ad hoc analysis, and we have some client-facing reporting. We call those data products. We treat them as a product. We get requirements, we build them, we deploy them using an engineering workflow. So those are data products, and that's where alerts sit. Let me cover these other 2 for completeness. We also run a data culture that includes data training, provisioning licenses for our platforms, a data gym, which is a weekly meeting. This talk is being recorded at Data Gym. Data Gym is where we exercise our data muscles, and we talk about data topics relevant to a broad spectrum of the company. We also support analysts in other groups, data analysts. The 4th column is data science. We do some of that, statistical analysis, model building, and model deployment. So back on the topic is an alert. It's a newer data product for us. So let me define what alerts are. And here's my definition. An alert is an actionable message. It's a message that's pushed to a shared channel. We happen to use Slack. There are other tools that companies use for shared communication. And those messages in these alerts are pushed to these channels to enable a workflow, to enable something to be done, some business process. And if the alerts are timely, it can be a near real-time workflow. So this is how we get some of the work done at HopSkipDrive. And let me show you some examples just to make this abstract definition make a little more sense. So this alert is about trips scheduled early in the morning. This trip is scheduled at 4 in the morning, a 4 a.m. trip. Well, we've never delivered a 4 a.m. trip. So this is probably an error. That's probably a 4 p.m. trip. We call this a defect. Somehow it's been scheduled for 4 a.m. So it generates this alert, and that blue link in the middle is a trip number. So when an operator clicks on that, they get taken to our administrative tool and they can review all the information about a trip, who organized the trip, what locations the trip is driving to, when the trip is, what passengers there are. They can look at notes on the trip. So maybe this is a legitimate 4 a.m. trip, but probably not. And what happens is they contact the organizer, and the organizer will reschedule this to 4 p.m. trip. The benefit of that is avoids a defect that could happen later on. Let's say we didn't catch this, we didn't have this process, and a driver goes out waiting for a passenger at 4 a.m. who doesn't show up. The ride gets canceled and someone gets charged. So that's a bad experience. The reason for this alert is to reduce those bad experiences. Those are what we call defects, and I'll come back to that later. So this can be dispatched pretty quickly, and that check mark indicates that someone looked at it. So everyone in the channel can see that. So 4 a.m. trips are something we try to have less of. Here's another example, another similar example of a trip that got built, and let's say it's driving a kid to an airport. The HopSkipDrive might seem like the best way to drive a kid to an airport, but actually HopSkipDrive doesn't do that. We aren't licensed to do that. We don't pay the fees. We don't have the policies in place to drive to the airport. So basically the operator would see this, say, oh, someone's going to the airport, it looks like, click on that link, and really determine from the information there whether it's a trip to an airport or school near an airport that just happens to be located there. So if it's a trip to the airport, they'll contact the organizer and cancel the trip. So this is how we use alerts to enable these kind of processes. It's a data quality process that makes our service a little better. So let me, I won't go over all our alert use cases in detail, but I want to go over the categories that we use alerts for. The two main categories are ride building. You've seen a couple of those. When a ride gets built, it could be built in such a way where it needs some more attention. And ride matching. Ride matching is where a driver is matched with a ride, because a driver needs to claim the ride in order to drive it. And after that matching occurs, there might be some problems, like the kids are too young to sit in the front seat, and these very specialized issues. So those might generate alerts, and our operations staff would deal with that in some way. The other interesting thing to me is this third category, which is others, just a wide variety or a long tail of other use cases. And like driver payments are too high, and there might be some mistake there, and various kinds of trip cancellations that cause other impacts. So, but the important thing is not these particular categories. It's just that we have two big use cases and a long tail of other use cases that keep coming up. So what I'd like to talk about now is the advantages we see from using alerts and why they've been successful. I've outlined three of them here. One is it creates a better UX, and UX is user experience. And I mean the user experience of our operations team. When there is an alert, it's clear there's work to do. There is an alert in the channel. Everyone can see it. The whole team can see it and talk about it if there's some complication or question about it. So it fits right into the workflow of other things the operations group is doing. Another advantage is it's detected automatically. Even when we have a dashboard, someone has to spend some time interpreting that dashboard, setting date parameters and really focusing in on what they want to see. All that is automated with alert, giving us a consistent policy. The operator doesn't have to guess what's an airport ride by looking at rides on a map, say, or looking at the dashboard that we've already built. but they just have to see the alert. So it saves them time. The third thing about alerts is it really narrows our focus when we're talking to our stakeholders. We need to work together and break down the work to be done into a very narrow focus. So it encourages us to have a well-defined process of detecting the alerts, messaging about the alerts, and reacting to the alerts and making sure they're actionable. So that narrow focus is in contrast to some dashboards we do that are very broad and answer a lot of different questions. Now, alerts aren't a silver bullet for everything. And in fact, there's some just specialized use cases that they work for. We've implemented alerts that fired too often and just flooded our operations team with things to look at. They told us they're not going to do that. So we shut down those kind of alerts when they flood the channel. We could also have false alerts. Let's say most of the airport alerts, if we didn't do an adequate job, were not really airport rides, and they just caused us to spin our wheels trying to resolve them when there was really nothing to resolve. So we try not to do that. We try to have a high true positive rate, and that requires frequent tuning, which you can see as a negative. We have to go back and tune these alerts from time to time. On the positive side, it makes sure those alerts are providing value. So those are the advantages of an alert. They just have a different user experience, and they feed into workflow, and they work well for some use cases, like the ones I've shown. So I'm sure that few of you in the audience there are at transportation companies for kids. So you might be wondering, how can you find the alerts? So I have a few tips about how you might find the use cases where alerts would work for you. Tip one is to look at your current processes that are manual, that have checklists, where you want the process to be done rigorously and you develop a checklist to make sure you don't miss anything, but maybe the detection of those events can be done through an alert kind of system. So check for that. You can also talk to your business users about defects. What defects are they seeing that the end user is seeing that you can in advance have an alert for and resolve before it becomes a problem? Make your service better. You can also talk to your stakeholders, business stakeholders, about their dashboards. Which ones do they look at very often? Maybe those can be an alert. In fact, our #1 dashboard for many years, because we implement an alert, it's been knocked down to 15th place. And there's many other dashboards that are used more now. So people are willing to wait for this alert instead of frequently looking at that dashboard. You might find that to be the case too. And if it's not clear that you have a lot of alert use cases, but you can find a couple obvious ones, implement those. Once you see the success of those and the business users see that, they'll find other uses for this alert mechanism that will help run your business. At least that's happening with us. So good luck in finding those use cases. I'd like to talk a little about our implementation, because we did a simple implementation, something that's called a minimum viable product. So we said, what is the simplest thing we can do to have these alerts going? So what we do is we implement each alert as a bash script, which is just a simple programming language. We encode the business logic of the alert in a SQL statement, like morning AM rides. There's a SQL statement that finds any ride that's been created recently that is an AM ride. I think between 11 p.m. and 5 a.m., something like that. So we run that query, and if there's any results come back, each row of that result set is an alert. It gets turned into an alert by being sent to Slack, and a specified channel that someone is monitoring. We also log that to our data warehouse so we can see, we can manage the alerts. And we have another use for that that I'll talk about in a minute. So we have these scripts, one for each alert, and we need to run them maybe every 10 minutes, maybe every day, maybe every week. So we use a scheduler called cron to do that. It has two parts, a configuration table, the cron tab, and a process that runs the cron daemon. So the cron daemon wakes up, reads the cron tab, and when it's time for these alerts to run, it runs them, and it runs those scripts we've written. So these queries and these scripts are running regularly and not reporting that often because most of the time we don't have an alert to report. The other piece of the platform that we've constructed is we use a monitoring tool called chronitor.io, and that's to tell us if there's any errors in the alert process, whether the alerts are running too long or whether they didn't run at all in the expected time. So we have production level monitoring and a dashboard we can go to. As you might have noticed, there's sort of alerts on alerts, so a little meta there. But that's our implementation. You will probably do something different. And there might be commercial offerings that do that. I know that Tableau has alerts. They didn't quite work for us in these cases, but they keep revising those, and I'm sure there's many other offerings. So that's what we implemented. And I want to talk about one last way we use alerts that might not be obvious is we consider anything that is not ideal to be a defect. And we measure those defects and include these business intelligence alerts as part of that defect measurement. So we try to keep under a certain defect rate. For our business, we try to have less than one defect per trip. So a defect might mean that the customer is inconvenienced in some way, or the ride is scheduled incorrectly, or the ride is scheduled for 4 a.m., things like that. So all those count as defects, and we keep track of the rate there to make sure we're hitting our target. And we also keep track of a composite service level score, and this green defect rate on target is part of that composite level service score among some other components. So we try to meet our targets and get 5 out of 5 each week, but we set them pretty aggressively. So we use alerts to measure defects, which is something we didn't really expect to do when we started this whole alert program. So I'd like to wrap up with a few takeaways. One, I'd like you to consider delivering a better user experience with alerts. It might be use cases where dashboards just create too much friction and have to be accessed too often to do a good job. As much as you work on dashboards, we could make them as effective as we could with alerts. Also, you might consider alerts because of the rich feedback you get with just the way the products are built. Is we talk to our stakeholders very frequently to make sure they're getting value out of it, tune them frequently, and it's a data product we know is getting value. Where some of our dashboards, it's we build it and forget about it. And we don't know how much value people are getting out of dashboards. We have to go back and interview our stakeholders to find that out. So alerts have very rich feedback. And I'd also ask you to consider automating defect tracking using alerts, the way I've shown. So that's the talk. That's about alerts. And I want to thank a whole bunch of people who really made this possible, from our business folks who requested these alerts, and the BI staff, the business intelligence staff who who implemented them, and a lot of our technical leaders and executives. So thank you very much. If you have any questions, you can send an email to bob@hopskipdrive.com, and have a good day.